We're live, and we
Uh,
are live.
we are
That's great,
live.
great. Welcome everybody. Um, this is AndWorld Design's Letter Appreciation Day event. Those of you joining us live, hello, and those of you joining us on rebroadcast, welcome as well. Like to just give a quick shout out to all the letterers out there joining us. You have our utmost respect on Letters Appreciation Day. We know what it takes doing this job we do day in, day out, and just making it look seamless to put these words together and tell a story in visual context is just amazing part of the job, and we appreciate all of your dedication. To all of you non-letterers out there, we appreciate you coming here as well, because that means you want to take time to understand the craft, and that's showing as much appreciation as possible, and we thank you all for coming. I'm your host, Darren Bennett, the founder of AndWorld Design. We're a lettering and design studio, doing lettering jobs for publishers, both big and small, independent and otherwise, making the best looking comics out there from the people who are the best at what they do. One such person is Justin Birch, who is here joining us now. Justin, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I letter comics on other days other than just Letter Appreciation Day.
Justin's being humble. Justin is our workhorse. He's responsible for such high-profile books as Something is Killing the Children, House of Slaughter, another Tiny Young book, A Nice House by the Sea now, and previously Nice House on the Lake. So yeah, you've seen his work. You love his work. He's amazing, and we're glad to have him here. Also joining us a little later will be DC Hopkins, my right-hand man. He's the recently upgraded to project manager of our studio, and he just takes care of the day in and day out, so I can focus on other endeavors that we're doing, such as events like this. I'm looking forward to doing more classes and more events that showcase what we do on a daily basis and bring the lettering craft to those of you out there. Before we begin, let me preface this by saying this is kind of off the cuff. I've got these bullet points I want to hit, but basically I'm just leaving this pretty open-ended, where you guys can feel free to type in the chat any questions or comments you may have. If I'm talking about something, you have a question that you want me to address, please feel free to do so in the chat. And actually, right now, if you don't mind starting in the chat, you can just list some of your favorite sound effects, and we'll get back to that a little later. But right now, one of the things that people usually ask me is what's my approach to not just lettering, but specifically sound effects. How do I come up with sound effects? What's my process? And I usually give a pretty generic answer. It's all encompassing, like, okay, well, I usually try to make sure it works with the art and such. But I never really delve into the actual thought process of what's going on. And I think that's important, because what it does is allows me to kind of just think about the whys and hows of what I'm doing. And even this past week, as I'm trying to prepare for this, now I'm thinking consciously of why I do certain things, and it allowed me to come up with cooler designs and something better than I would have done on autopilot, which is what I'm usually doing. Like when I'm lettering, things are usually just automatic because I've been doing this for so long. But when you start to sit down and think about all the elements that go into it, because it's really graphic design, right? And so we have all these different graphic design principles at play: rhythm, balance, contrast, emphasis, gestalt principles. And when you're not thinking of those, it's just like I said, you can be on autopilot and just things just kind of, they work, but it's not really planned out, thought out as much as it can be. And I'm just hoping to share with you my process, go through step by step of what I'm doing, and hopefully it informs your decision making so that you can come up with some better storytelling for comics as well. And so now it's time to get into it. We'll be talking about everything around sound effects. Like I said, it's pretty open ending. Whatever you guys want to discuss in the chat, I'm down for. So feel free to open it up. And right now, let me just get into the presentation and share my screen. All right, bear with me. I'm pretty fresh at all this live streaming stuff, so if I'm stumbling, you can just make fun of me in the chat as well. All right.
I encourage everyone to do that. Please make fun of Darren in the chat.
All right, so so my order of operations usually when I'm working on sound effects is looking at style first. I'm trying to determine the style, then after that, the placement, then possibly the size of the sound effect, the orientation, and finally I'm looking at effects and color. So that's my basic, walkthrough order of operations. But like I said, it kind of gets deeper than that. Justin, do we have any sound effects in the chat, or if you just want to rattle off any sound effect, I'll take it.
We don't have any onomatopoeia in the chat yet, but we do have one quick question.
Sure.
If you would like to answer that. Ash P. Reeds has asked, I am a Padawan comic book editor.
Okay.
What advice would you give me? What would you want me to know? Letterer to editor.
Letterer to editor. Let's see. I think for the most part, it's helping us out script wise. If when you're in the document, and I've said this on another video that I did, that document is a tool for us. And so if you're looking at it as a tool to help out the letterer and make sure we have what we need, that helps out a ton. And as far as sound effects, what that would require is making sure we have an understanding of what the sounds are if there's no context there, and we're just doing some guesswork as to what the sound is. Usually it's pretty straightforward. If we see an explosion in there and we see the explosion says boom, then we know where it goes. But if there's something subtle, this past week I saw there was a sliding door and there was a screech, or it was more of a scree, but the character in the sliding door was a robot. So it could be that the robot has that scree. So there's context that needs to be shaped out there. And if you guys can help us out with that, that's great. I'm sure there are tons of other stuff. Justin, can you think of anything else that might apply?
Not off the top of my head. It's one of those things that I don't really think about until it happens, and
right.
Then I'm just like, ah.
Exactly. So I just was talking about a boom and explosion, right? And so when I'm thinking of booms and explosions, usually they're they're sort of sound effects that are rough. If it's an explosion, you kind of see the roughness of the artwork or what have you. And so I'll go through my steps when I'm thinking. Like I said, the first step is thinking of style, and so I'm thinking of what sort of font style would work best with a boom. And so there, it's really like, if we're talking in terms of graphic design, the brainstorming portion of the process, and it's rapid fire, but my brain is doing its research and editing, sketching out different ideas. So I might go through a couple different booms depending on what's there. I might do a more jagged style or this is a lot more angular, this is a lot more jagged, and then I might look at the art and see, okay, well, do we see a lot of angles in that? Do we see a lot of just sort of these sharper lines? And I might go with something like this when I see that sort of thing. So it's like I said, this process of sort of seeing what's there. And what I find helps is if when I'm first working through a sound, I'll actually verbally sound it out. So I might do a boom, and actually verbally say it out loud. And it might not even be one for one sound. So like this boom might be a and I might just work on that and see what vibe does that give me when I'm looking through my font list, because I'll go into a different font, and if I was to do something like a shing, right? That doesn't seem like it should be rigid like that, but it might be a little more sharp. And I might do something like this, where it's a little sharper. This actually still has more roundness to it, so I might even think of something else. We might go fight to the finish, but the thinner version, right? And like I said, I usually have these go-to fonts that I have. Fight to the Finish is one of my favorites because it's very versatile. It works with a bunch of different styles. But you know, you really have to be careful at what you're picking out when you're working through this. So like I said, I'll have a mental process of steps, sketching out, trying a different few ones that go on the page. But like I said, I want to sound them out. When I sound out the words, I come up with adjectives for those words. Is it sharp? Is it guttural? Is it you know, shaky, organic? And you know, you start to develop this vocabulary for sound, and that really helps you out with all the onomatopoeia. If you kind of think of it in that way, where we're visually communicating these sounds, and you work through the process of coming up with how that might be displayed, how something sharp might be displayed. Well, obviously, like I said, you have these angles, these sharp edges. A crash could look like that, right? But what if I usually use a font called Crash Course because it's pretty cool. It has these open areas, whatever. And so if I wanted to do that with this, I can just, you know, work my eraser in here and do the same thing, where now I can pull apart these and just and this would probably work better if it was a font that was a sound effect called Crash, but you can see the idea that I'm getting here. It starts to break apart. So you think about the vocabulary of the word and then address what font you want to use for it, and also you're going to look at the artist style and see what works with that as well, you know. So rather than go through these, Justin, we didn't have any more examples. No, nobody wants. Nobody's brave enough.
No, but I have a question.
What's your question? Give me your
My question is, so you mentioned that you sort of have a list or a bank of sound effect fonts that you fall back on.
Right.
Do you ever find yourself going back to those, you know, core ones too often, or do you worry that you use them too much?
Yeah, I actually do. And that's one of the things I was talking about with revisiting this process, because that's that autopilot that I worry about. And so, like I said, Fight to the Finishes, you'll see that in a lot of my work. And so sometimes when I start to look at my work and I see that I'm overusing a font, I might retire that font. There are plenty that I've retired in the past. That Crash Course that I just pulled up, I used to use it heavily, and I don't think I've used it in, you know, the past year or more, just because you go to that bank and it starts to get stale, and so I don't like to keep rehashing the same old stuff, especially when I'm working with so many different artists. You don't want it to look the same over each piece of art, and so like I said, you usually have these go-tos, but once you start to kind of work through that process all the time, or consciously, I should say, then you should be starting to come up with fresh new ideas, fresh new fonts. And I would always recommend kind of looking at newer things that are available, try a few different fonts on for size and see, okay, is this working better? When you look at the art, pick a few different fonts that work with that particular artist style, and then incorporate those instead of your old standbys. For somebody like Kari Randolph, who was generous enough to let us use his work for Sirens of the City, he has this, you know, energetic animation style. I love it. It's, you know, reminiscent of manga, you know, those fast, energetic television shows. You can see he uses speed lines like crazy as well. So it's really fun to do something like that. And on this particular page, he had this character stepping out in front of a bus, and we have a couple of horn sounds. So we got this honk.
Sorry, I'm always going to laugh whenever I hear the word honk. I apologize.
Why is that? Just a funny word?
Because I'm a 13-year-old boy.
Okay. So here, again, I can use my old standby, but what if I was to look at his work? We see that energy going on. Is there another font that might work better here? Like, is there something that I could use that might match the vibe, have that same sharpness of the honk? Is the honk sharp? So this is ideally one of those times where I see, okay, what does the sound convey to me when I go honk? It's really deep. It's really, it's deeper, and I think we would find a thicker font. So something pretty bold should work. I'm trying to work through my mental list of fonts that I would use. And so I think, let's try an old school. Once in a while, what I'll do is I'll go back to stuff I used to use way back in the day and see how I can use it now. And so this font, Holy Mackerel, was one of the earliest fonts that I used to use, and I stopped using it. And I think it would work well here because it does have that. It's very much thicker than Fight to the Finish. It's got that heavier sound that I'm looking for, and I can also kind of play with it where I get rid of those angles I don't like, and then move around. And feel free to manipulate your fonts. You don't stick with the original shape of the sound effect. If you don't like certain points, delete them. If you didn't like this angle right here and you just wanted it straight like that, and just feel free to delete it. And so I'll manipulate the font. Like I said, the first thing is style. So I have a style that I want. Now I'm looking at placement, and I immediately just placed it where I wanted it in the first place.
Sorry.
Yeah, but that's like I said, you're on automatic half the time. And so like what I might do is, put it over here. But it just doesn't feel right to me, So I'll keep it like this, manipulate some of the letters, put it in this general area, and maybe, he's doing 2 honks. So we don't want to keep them the same. And often what I'll do is with letters like N and K, I'll flip them so that they're not immediately, just rehashes of the same letters. If there's no alternate style in that font, I'll make an alternate style on my own. You can flip the O as well. If it's a symmetrical O, obviously that won't work, but you can flip that as well. And we might bring this a little larger. And what I'll usually do is put an outline around something that I want. Like, I don't color on my inks. I don't use color on the inks because in the end, the colors can vary so much and they can change so much when we finally get to the color stage that I don't worry about that until later. So I'll keep it in black and white. And when I'm doing that, I'll use something that I probably think will be a darker color in black. And then something in a lighter color, I'll just, having white with a black stroke. It just seems to work better for me that way. And like I said, I just kind of manipulate these things until I'm happy with where they're at. And so actually, you know what? I think this first honk would be softer, and then this one, which seems a little louder because of that, because I made that O a little bigger, should be second. So I'll do something like that where we have the 2 honks in place, and I'm sort of creating a balance on the page. That's why I went over here with placement, is because of what I was talking about earlier when we're thinking in terms of graphic design principles, balance. So we have over here, we have this character taking this half of the bus. And so I want to sort of create some symmetry with that, and have this overlapping the bus. And so now we have two halves that are well balanced on the page. and it just works a lot better. I could have, done something like this with the honk honk. It's the same sound effect, obviously, right? But having it in the place that I have it is trying to use the graphic design principles that best help make a visual impact to the reader. We're thinking in terms of scale. Obviously, we want these honks to be loud, so if they can be big and they can be just as big as the character. We're thinking in terms of the two symmetrical sides, and also we're trying to keep the art as visible as possible. I don't want to cover up too much of the art, so I'm not, I don't want to put this, too in front of him, because now we're covering that bus entirely, and I'd hate to do that. The artist spent a lot of time on it. Kari is, drawing this bus out, and he's had a whole time of it trying to get it just right, and I don't want to mess that up for him. So I'm going to try and stay off the art as much as possible. Same with this panel here, where we have, I believe there's a scree and then a crash, right? So I'm going to type out. Let me see if I can pull up the script. All right.
While you're doing that, we do have a quick question from Bernardo, who says, "Hi Darren, Justin, happy Letterer Appreciation Day to you. What's a sound effect font that you really like but you rarely have the chance to use?" I've been thinking about this for a couple minutes, so I'll go first.
Yes.
So that'll give you a chance. Mine is a font called Two Fisted.
Okay.
I don't know what it is about that font. I think it's thinner, and for whatever reason, I really like thin fonts. It's one that I wish I could use more often, or I could find a reason to use it more often. I just like the way that it looks. I mean, it really does look like it's off of a brush almost. It's drippy, if that's a good way to explain it.
I love Two Fisted. No, I got you. We're actually going to try it right now. Two Fisted. All right, so let me pull that up. My computer's running slow with all this going on, but I've got it activated now. And let's see if Two Fisted will work for this scree and a crash, because the scree is, a mechanical. I don't think it would work, but it's a cool font, and this is exactly what we're talking about. So I tend to try things out, see if it'll work, because there are fonts that I want to use, as Fernando pointed out, but you just don't have the opportunity to use them. And so I'll try them. I'll see, would that work here? And then I'm thinking through that process. I'm seeing, okay, well, this sounds like it's a bus hitting a man. It seems, more mechanical, more scratchy or something, than this more organic, drippy font, as you said. So I would use this more. I try and use it with something like a drip. I'm typing out drip there. I'll use it like with some sort of drip, or something bloody or gurgly, because I think it would work best there. I've used it a few times. Sometimes I use it for like some voices, like they're like these maniacal voices in the air. I'll do that sort of thing. I love, like, it's one of the fonts that I love, and so now you've got me sitting here trying to think of a font that I would love to use.
Well, while you're thinking, also apologies, I mispronounced. It's Bernardo.
So, it's Bernardo. It's not Fernando.
Yeah,
Bernardo.
sorry. That's my fault. I should have. I wear glasses, bad eyesight. R's look like N's. That's why I get a lot of notes from editors.
We'll forgive you on that one. All right. So with this screen crash, because I know I know what happened. This guy got hit by the bus. It seems really gory, and so I'd probably use a brush font here, right? So I'd look for a brush font like bezel brush for that scree. I know I said mechanical, but I think the scree can be a little organic here. I'm taking some artistic license, and the scree will be this sort of organic brush thing going on. And I'll usually leave fonts overlapping before and not even worry too much about, you know, breaking the borders when I'm first placing them. And then the crash, for some reason, my because of this. All right. My boxes were getting filled.
I also forgot that you're one of the letterers who doesn't believe in putting your art layer on transparency or lowering the transparency when you're.
Actually,
thank you. That's so much better. Thank you.
I've gotten used to it, so I actually have done it more recently. It was just a speed thing for me, where I would neglect to do it over multiple pages, but because now that I work in multiple art boards, I do it because I don't have to do every single page doing that. So now that speed thing has become less of an issue. But I think with this crash, I'll use something that's kind of still brushy, but it has a roughness to it and a louder sound. So we've got this crash that happens right after the scree. And I'm just moving things around. Like I said, all of these things are like, you know, fast-paced thinking. But like I said, there's a process to it that is sort of forgotten as you keep doing these things. But it's really important to keep a mental note of what you're actually doing when you're working, so that you can come up with better ideas, cooler concepts, if that's what you're looking for. If you're just, you know, just got to get the job done, I understand. I get into that mode as well. But I think if you start to pay attention, it can be really cool. So this is one of those things that now I've got the size down for these things. I've got the orientation down. And now what I'll think about is the effects and the color, right? And again, this isn't a comic. This is more inks, but this is actually the final version. And Sirens, the artwork was still in inks and just had these little splashes of color, and that helped because what I could do is use those splashes of color in my work. And that's another reason I don't like to dim pages, Justin, because I can't do my eyedropper.
Oh my gosh.
So why would I want to do that?
Hopkins is here.
Hopkins is here. All right. So as I mentioned, DC Hopkins is joining us. I'm going to go ahead and add him in. Add to stage. All right. Mr. Hopkins, welcome.
Hey,
aboard.
What's up? Sorry I'm late.
You're all good. Tell the kind people here who you are and what you do.
I am the lead letterer and project manager at AndWorld, and I letter comics and project manage other comics for our letterers. I like the AIM shirt, Justin. That's very nice.
Yeah, I like the way that you've assigned yourself titles like lead letterer.
See?
Yeah, I just assigned that to myself. I just promoted myself live during a event where Darren can't say no.
I can't.
I like that. I like that.
What's your title, Justin?
I think you said it earlier, workhorse.
Yeah, he's the workhorse. So I'm actually just, you know, roughing this in. Usually I'd use my pen tool on this, but I just kind of drew it out, and now it's bothering me that it's not precise. So I'm going in and fixing my mask. And one of the reasons why I do masks, and I'm sure, you know, we have people in here, all other letterers who are all about the mask, and we don't even, you know, usually question why. We just do them. First of all, they look cool, but one of the reasons why we want to do it is because it sort of helps out with creating motion. We're thinking of this kind of coming off of the page. So it's instead of just being static, it's sort of changing in scale, and this overlap, this cropping changes depth to it. So this is coming from a far off place. It gives us depth of foreground, background. Kind of helps out with showing that this isn't all just happening. I've masked it behind her, but we can work it so that it's either behind her, for her, stuff like that. And so we use these things not just to stay off the artwork and look cool, but like I said, it creates depth and changes time and space in a visual way. And again, these are like principles that we don't think about, but they're there inherent in what we're doing. And it's important that we kind of understand them so that we can incorporate them elsewhere. In this case, like I said, I have this coming behind her because and one of the things I want to point out is I'm not one of those people who's pretty like stringent on keeping sounds from the point of impact. I think sound travels. So when it's in the air, you hear it in the atmosphere. And so I have this happening behind her, and I think with this scree, I think what would play better, and we have contrast here. This is another going back to all these principles. So I have this scree, and what if I just change that scree into black and this to white, or I can use a gradient if I chose to and have it blending into that. Or we can use, say, the blues that he has in here. So there's all sort of things that we can start to do working with the sound effect to like working with the sound effect that can kind of help us out visually. And like I said, just kind of paying attention to these things helps us out, helps us tell the story better. Right now I'm playing with color, playing with dimension, playing with space so that we can help tell the story. This is happening away from her, impacted around her space. And these two sounds, although they're coming from the same bus hitting, I want them to be separately identifiable. So I use this contrast, and I filled up this thing balancing the panel as well. So like I said, all these principles are at work. And once you start to pay attention to them, you can just employ them however you want when you're working on other sound effects as well. So that's sort of what my process would be for a page like this. Again, I'm thinking of this energetic art style, what sounds are being conveyed, and playing with the things that I just mentioned, color, contrast, and all else.
Do you have time for a couple questions?
I always have time for questions, Justin.
All right. That's I would have typed that exactly as I said it too. Now that I'm thinking about it, Ash says, continuing off your answers to my question, at script stage, would it help if the author/writer provide audio clips of sound effects? Would it make your job easier?
Ooh, I think it's best to kind of leave some interpretation there. I think having that personal responsibility for describing the sound kind of helps inform my own decision making. Obviously, if that's something that the writer wants to do, that's cool. But I think then we get into too much control there, and then I don't have the creative license to go crazy with something. Like again with the scree, the writer might hear it mechanically, and then when I hear a scree that's an audio format that's straight mechanical, it might just lock me into a particular font instead of me figuring out, okay, well, I want to use this more brush type stroke because it'll play better with this crash, and it also kind of gives that creepy vibe that this this crazy event is happening where this guy is getting just demolished by a bus behind him. And so I'd say that's better left out, but again, I wouldn't say no, we don't want that at all. It might be helpful in some ways.
Gartastic asks, besides Comic Raft and Blambot, are there any foundries you like for comic styles fonts?
Comic style fonts foundries. I've been using, well, for manga. I've recently been using some of the house fonts that I was mentioning that to you, Justin. House Industries, they have a lot of cool fonts, and I've been using those since my days at Tokyo Pop, and so I've recently tried to incorporate those into, and I guess that might be closer to Bernardo's answer. I've tried to start to incorporate those House Industry fonts into lettering jobs. Let me see if there's one cool one that Nasty House used to be one I used to use. Flyer fonts, I use that a lot. But yeah, there are plenty of House Industries fonts that I find pretty useful. I don't know. What do you got? Do you guys have any foundries that you can think of?
I would throw lo-fi fonts out there. Steve
Lo-fi.
Wands.
Yep.
Yeah, I like those. I use a few of those fairly regularly. And then let me think. There's so many that I have like muscle memory bookmarked, but I don't remember the names, like to pull them up and stuff. There's one. Let's see here. I can get it right now. This one is more for. I use this more for sound effects and not so much actual lettering, dialogue, and whatnot. But tugcu.co, tugku.co, I guess. That person, whoever they are, I'm not sure. I don't know anything about them, but they do a ton of great like genre stuff. So I'll pull that in if I'm designing something in the realm of fantasy or horror or sci-fi. Any of those kind of, there's a bunch of cool pixel ones as well. So they work for sound effects pretty well, but not, they would all be like designy stuff. And yeah.
Sarah Lindsley for manga stuff too. And I've recently been using them in traditional comics as well. You can find SS Stabby in Rare Flavors a lot because I thought it really worked well. That's the one I started typing in earlier for the sharpness because it just has that cool sharp look and it looks hand done. So I try to, like I said, I try to figure out new fonts that I can use here and there. She's got multiple versions, thin, bold, and like I said, you could find this in Rare Flavors throughout. It's worked well with that art, and that's one of the font foundries. She has is it coffee or Ko-Fi? Coffee? Is it coffee? It's coffee.
I think it's coffee because it's like coffee. Buy me a coffee.
Yeah. Okay. Well, she has a coffee where you can, pick up some of her fonts. Not Bernardo, but Fernando. Nando fonts was pretty cool too. Who else? There are a lot of letterers who are doing fonts, and we'll be one of those soon. Because now that I have stepped back a little bit from lettering full time, I've had time to develop fonts, and we'll have our sound effect fonts available to you soon. Bet you didn't know that, Justin.
I didn't.
See, learn something new every day.
I look forward to overusing those.
All right, I'll stop you when you start to overuse them.
One last quick question for you for now until we get more coming in.
Yep.
Kate has asked, hello from the UK. It's past midnight here, but this demo is too good to miss. I'm an editor, but love to learn to letter too. Any advice on getting started?
What I would suggest is like one of the things I keep harping on is kind of learning the craft, learning the ins and outs of what goes on behind the scenes in lettering, just the design element of it all. And it's not just, slapping balloons on the page. There's a language to it. And learning that language, I would recommend Blambot Nate Picos has a cool book out there that'll help you get a full, broad understanding of the anatomy of lettering. And I think that's a good starting point. And then, just start to apply it. As an editor, maybe you have access to pages where that you can, start to build, your own work on and test out. And I do recommend it. I love, that cross training element where editors learn what we're doing, because it helps inform, the editor on what the needs of the other creators are. For myself, I love to learn other parts of the business, whether it be the penciler job, the inker job, so on and so forth. I've studied coloring to kind of get color theory down. I've been an editor. I've worn many hats, so that it helps inform my decision making when it comes to designing and lettering a comic book. So yeah, that's very cool, and I really applaud that, and hope you keep on subscribing to pages like this, and we should have more content that can help you on this journey. And
Can I
was just going to ask if you have any advice.
Yeah, I've never thought about this until right now when you were saying that, but I almost wonder if you're in that position of wanting to learn how to letter, especially if you're an editorial, making placement guides to not necessarily give to your letterer, assuming that you're working with a professional letterer, but make them and then kind of see how the letterer turns in the files and see kind of what your placements were like compared to the letterers, who is going to have just more experience and a faster sort of like eye and ease, because that's what they're doing all the time, tons of books, tons of pages, etc. And then kind of look that way, because we get placement guides all the time from editors, and it's my understanding more than anything at this point is it's very kind of a tradition more than anything, because they're pretty old in terms of the breakdown, but they are helpful for us at times if we get confused on characters or whatever else. But then there are also times we get placement guides where we're like, when you did this placement guide, you probably should have seen that there's not enough room for all of this stuff. So it also helps in those situations to where, especially if you're trying to learn, it gives you those opportunities to see that stuff, right out the gate. And then also to kind of compare and contrast with the letter in terms of where their placements were. Because sometimes there will be situations where it can be, relatively arbitrary where a balloon goes, if it's half an inch over to the left or right, depending. But there can be other like completely different approaches to flow and everything else that you may not have considered, and the letter will turn something in. So I don't know. I just thought about that. It's almost like reverse placement guides in a way, but it's such a unique position that you're in as the editor here to kind of have your own thing going. And then you don't have to give those to the letterer necessarily until you're like, okay, I got the hang of this. I think I know where stuff's at. That would definitely, especially if you're in that position of wanting to learn the lettering side of it, I think could be a pretty big asset, as opposed to what I think it is for a lot of people, which is just kind of like, oh, we need to get the placement guide so we can get the book sent out, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I love that. That's cool, man. I think that's a great idea and very helpful. Placement guides are one of those things, like you said, where it can be hit or miss. So I think if you're, really going about it intentionally, that you want to see if you're on the money with how lettering should work, then that can definitely help your develop your understanding of what we're doing. Let's see. This is one of Justin's favorite things, right? I don't know. Hopkins, do you care when the artist includes their own sound effects?
Were you saying this is one of Justin's favorite things sarcastically or seriously?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, now wait a minute. Wait a minute. Can I at least defend myself here for one second?
Defend away.
Listen, if the artist puts in the sound effect, then I love it. I just wish they would do it for the entire book.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. only because like I don't know who the artist is or what this is. This actually this looks like SGM. Is that who it is?
Mm-hmm.
Sean Gordon Murphy. Okay.
Yep.
So in this case, like I like that sound effect. I think it looks good. I wouldn't have put the exclamation point, but that's just one of our things, obviously.
Yes.
as I don't even know if that's a letter thing or an AndWorld thing at this point, but yeah, I agree. The problem comes in when they do like 20% of them, and so you have to figure out with the other 80%, how do I make something consistent with what they've already done, but still able to do my thing and not get too blocked in. So that's kind of where I'm. It's not the worst thing in the world. I have had situations where I've been like, hey, do we have layered files? Just because it'll be easier to work around these, or whatever else.
Right.
But for the most part, I think especially at the professional level, artists typically have a decent, if they're doing them and if they're confident enough to throw them in there with their art, odds are they can pull them off.
Right. For me, I feel like it's like a cheat code, right? So like, it's harder for me to kind of match the sound effect. Like you said, we want to make it, look pretty seamless. But my goal usually coming into it is to do the lettering, whether balloon sound effects, how the artist would make it look. And if I know how the artist would make it look, that helps me out a little bit. So something like this, I'm looking at it, depending on how much time I have, we're usually up against the wire where we have to turn this in, relatively quickly. So I wouldn't have as much time to kind of develop just a font base for this. But if it's like first issue, I've got a lot of time on my hand. I might, start to trace these out. I might, do, and I did this on Briar. I actually came up with letters to work with the style that was on that art, and I just had like this, all these different characters out in the pasteboard, and I would just reuse them whenever I come across a sound effect, because it was a sort of brush sound effect style that was needed to use, and I had to make do. So sometimes I'll do that depending on if I have time. But most of the time I'm just like, okay, well, what does this remind me of? And so something like this, I go to something like Wall Scrawler. It's pretty close, not exact, but it does have some of those elements. Let me use Wall Scrawler. This will work. So like I said, it's not going to be exact, but if I can kind of match it, then this becomes my baseline for the fonts on the rest of the page, or the sound effects on the rest of the page. I might, use this sort of as a key to figure out, okay, well, this is the font that I'll use for the majority of sound effects that don't have to have, different, like let's say if it's a crash down here, I might not use that for a crash because this doesn't really match that vibe to me. And again, I don't use this. It's an AndWorld thing. I think there are other letterers who refuse to, but we are definitely a studio who does not.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, we don't like exclamation points. It's just not a thing. And with this M, I go ahead and chop off those top corners and bring it in. So now I have something like the boom there, and this is sort of my baseline for sound effects going forward. I'm like, okay, well, Wall Scrawler can work. So if this is a whoosh or something, bring this down, point size. If this is a whoosh, then I'll probably use this font and see how it would work. If it's, if I don't end up liking it, I'll pick something that's similar in that same bank. But I'm looking at this boom as a guide as to what sort of fonts work for here. It's definitely not, not something like Fight to the Finish that I usually use, right? Like, so I'm not going to use. It kind of has the same vibe, but it's too thin. If we use the bold version, I don't think it works as well. So it looks out of place with what's on the page, and that's something where we were getting at before, we don't want to look out of place with what's already there. And also he uses, forgot to delete a thing. All right. Also, he has some texture on here, right? So with that texture, I might decide to use a brush here that kind of matches that. And if you have some brushes available, definitely I'd recommend keeping a brush list, a brush set. Blambot now has brushes for download and for sale, and so we see this texture now, and I think that can definitely work to our benefit. And I would do something like this, and all of this I would probably do towards the end. Like I said, effects and stuff are last on my list of things to establish when I'm pulling off a font, but you can see how that's a lot closer to what's on the page than just using, what I have up here. So those are things I'll start to keep in mind as I'm developing styles for each font on this page. Again, thinking in terms of placement, I randomly put this down here, but it works because if I was to do this whoosh up top, let's say, the whoosh was happening and I want it up here. Now, it kind of plays, right? But I think it'd work much better down here because we have all this dead space, right? I can sort of create the motion, and I usually do a lot of skewing because I want to, again, we were talking about creating motion, creating depth, creating things like that. And I want to create that with that angular look, angled look. And now I use a lot of eyedropper too when it comes to colors because I want to stay within the color palette of the page. And again, that's one of those reasons why I don't start to add color ahead of time in the ink stage. If I only have inks, I leave it black and white because the colors can change and it'll mess up what I'm doing there. So something like that. I might also, instead of a stroke, one thing I see people do is they'll always use a black stroke. It doesn't always have to be black, like I always see a lot of black strokes. So use what's there, and putting this light blue stroke around here separates it from the background, so we create that contrast and just gives it that much more visibility than if I was just to leave that without any stroke at all, because it was looking okay without the stroke, but just adding that gives me separation from the back, all those little hash marks and things like that. So those are one of the things that I usually tend to do, especially if it's something like a image that has color holds. I usually use those color holds. And if you're not familiar with color hold, it's when the artwork is this like monochromatic thing. It doesn't have any black inks around it. It's just like you can see a color hold on these fins, I want to call them, on this character. He doesn't have any dark inks. It's just all holds, which makes it pretty convenient to do this light stroke behind it, and then that separates this artwork from the rest of it. So we create a point of emphasis there. See, all these thoughts just come to you as you work through. And then I believe we have a scree, right? And I can go back to the well, right? We use that same bezel brush, right? We use that same bezel brush scree, but because we were talking about earlier, not reusing, maybe I want to use something a little sharper in tone. What do we got? Anybody got a suggestion of a font that we can use here?
Like a raw bones.
Raw bones.
Is that too thin?
Yeah, no, that works. I think that'll work. Let's try raw bones. Do I have that?
I think that's what it's called. I always type in bones and then find it.
Yeah, I think it's raw bones. Oh, my computer's running slow, but we got it. All right. When you guys see me not doing anything finding these fonts. I'm in my font manager program, Connect Fonts I use. And I would highly recommend it so that your computer doesn't run slow like mine, so that you're just activating and deactivating fonts as needed. Let's go with raw bones. Here. Oh no! You know what we're gonna do here, Justin?
No,
I like the
don't.
raw bones. I like the raw bones, but we're gonna work with two-fisted. We're gonna work with two-fisted here.
That's a Justin font right there.
Yeah. So the question we had earlier was a font that we really like that we don't get to use a lot, and this was the first font that came to my mind.
That you don't get to use a lot?
I don't use it a lot. Well, okay.
Dude,
sorry.
If you have another kid and don't name it Two-Fisted, I'll be shocked. That's how much I know you like this font.
Okay, everyone watching, we're doing our best to keep it as professional as possible. if this was a conversation that was happening off camera, there would be a lot of cursing happening right now.
All right, so to avoid them, bickering, I'm just gonna go through here and again, looking at this space, looking at the balance of this page, what I want to do, we have, this centralized character. It's a little off center, but, central character. And we have, if you guys can see my arrow, I hope so. We have the ship angled away from it. And so I want to create that balance again by, just kind of skewing this in this direction. So now we have this triangulation on him. Again, I put that black stroke that I said not to do earlier, and I think I'm going to remove it because I don't like it in this case. And I just messed up because I hit ungroup ahead of time, and now I have to select these individually because I'm an idiot. But now I can just get rid of this. All right, so that's what I want to do. And again, we just create a kind of a rhythm by just manipulating. I'll ungroup these again. And I want it to be kind of, just musical. Like we have this up and down motion because the scree isn't like one continuous scree. I know it is one because it's not one, straight note. Yeah, continuous note. See, that's why you're here. I was going to call you Justin. Look at that. That's why you're here, Hopkins. It just saved me from myself.
Can I? I'll throw in something here if you don't mind that you taught me. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned for sound effects. I struggled a lot with them early on. I still at times do. I think it was one of the things that took me a long time to kind of get comfortable with. And overall I am now. But at the beginning, one of the things I remember you told me is you were like, stop. This is how I remember you saying it. Maybe this is what you said, but stop Tetrising your sound effects, your individual characters within your sound effect. And I had a habit of trying to sort of like free transform like that R into the K, and then I would do all kinds of weird stuff to try to make it sort of look coherent and locked together in a way that to my eye, my unexperienced eye, looked like some sort of organization or design or whatever.
Right.
Just the simple up and down, sort of alteration with, and not doing it mechanically, but just keeping it that sort of simple rhythm is so huge for sound effects. And for me, at least, it was a big thing that I had to look at in terms of, okay, I need to, at least in this situation, do way less and not do way more. And I think with, at least for me, that's one of the few times with sound effects that it felt like that was the takeaway was, mess with it a little bit less. And then you can add in whatever you might come into play later, like you've been explaining, the strokes or whatever else that might enhance the sound effect, but the actual word doesn't need to be. And when I look at my old sound effects now, they look just absolutely crazy. Just like I was rotating the page around the entire time I was lettering it or something. But yeah, that was huge. That was a really big lesson for me to that took for whatever reason a little bit to click. And then once it did, my sound effects improved by like 200%. I think just by that. And then I was able to fine tune the rest of the stuff with time.
So yeah, that's good point. Yeah, you want to, you know, like I said, like simple things like that rhythm that I'm creating. It's once you get it, you get it. But like if you're not familiar with, you know, just creating this undulation, it's sort of like you need to kind of not study it, but you need to like kind of grasp the concept in order to apply it. And that's like one of the reasons why we're sitting here tonight, is kind of going over these things, so that you see the concepts and you can employ them just, you know, the way they're meant to. One of the things that I just did was to try to do what we were doing with this. I don't know if I'm really happy with it. I'd probably keep playing around with this, but with you know, this brush stroke that I used here to add texture, tried to do that here, but it's kind of creating some shapes that I don't like within the R. It's mostly because of the font, because Justin picked a horrible font. But you can see like it's trying. It's, you know, it's trial and error. You can get, you know, some good learning processes out of this. So like you'll see what works, you'll see what doesn't, and then it'll help build your repertoire that much. Like just don't be afraid to try new things. If it's not working, get rid of it. If it is, then you know you have something in your body of work that you can kind of rely on. It's in your hip pocket, and you can pull that out whenever you need to. Let me think. For this crash, go ahead.
I was going to ask that first sound effect at the top. Would you mask that, or would you leave it? Okay, I was just curious if you did that intentionally or.
Yeah, I definitely mask it. And again, it's popping off of the page. It's seeing like, okay, this is going. The sound is traveling further than what we see. It's coming out towards us. So we're feeling that, you know, yeah, as an audience member, as a person who's reading this, it's coming at you, and you're, you know, you kind of, your brain is wrapping your mind around this coming off of the panel and directed at you. And so I kind of encourage, you know, this sort of masking effect whenever possible, whenever reasonably possible. Don't just do it just to do it. Like there's got to be reasons, and this is one of those reasons. In this case, in this example, where I would do it. So like, for instance, somebody might go crazy with masking and want to put it, you know, everywhere, like behind this character here or something, right? Like, and this is going to be bad intentionally, but he's not coming from, the ship is not coming from behind him, so I wouldn't want to mask this area here. Even though, okay, you're trying to make things look cool. Oh, look what I can do with masking. But now you've broken the storytelling. It's coming from a different location than the ship itself. So the brain might disconnect that, and you might not, you know, it might not visually cause anything for the reader. They're not too disturbed, but it is, you know, kind of, it's incorrect as it is. So you want to make sure you're not just doing things for just any reason at all. It has to be a purpose to it. Let me think. So we have that boom. That I would think is our big panel. This is our main panel. So one of the things that can happen is, I've seen this a lot too, is that somebody might use this and do this big old crash or something and hollow it out, right? And it's not the worst idea in the world. It works, but if my big impact panel is up here, I don't want this to overshadow that. We're looking at points of emphasis, and I don't want this to overshadow that. And I've also really intruded on all this artwork. So what might work better, and I'd probably pick a different font considering the art style and what we've done up top with that boom. But I'm just going to stick with this for now because I have it on the page. All right, let's do this. What I would do is kind of do the same thing we had up top. kind of balance it out, and keep the crash down here, right? So I don't want to cover up too much. I have this black negative space down here, so why not work with that and still have a pretty big crash. It's not, it's not insignificant, but it's not the biggest thing on the page. The biggest thing on the page should be that boom, so that we can really see that that's the panel that's really selling this page. There's a lot going on down here, and I probably wouldn't keep this black as either, just because it's getting lost down there. But I just want to block in that shape first, and then I'll go ahead and pick a color, maybe something in this realm. Nope. And the background color, the stroke here could probably be black in this case. And so we have something like that where it'll stand out. Maybe I'll use that same orange. It's getting lost down there, and this is one of those things that I play around with, and I can, I'll stay on a page for days, just kind of, tweaking this, tweaking that. But yeah, and that's one of those things I encourage. Like, if you're just one and done and you think that's it, and you might have nailed it on the first try, but if you haven't played with your page, you're probably just rushing through. So not that I'd encourage, you have to play with every page, but if you haven't experienced that, I think, you probably aren't really figuring out things you should figure out. There's a whole lot of communication going on, and I think you should be more cognizant of how you're communicating these ideas when you're working through this whole thing. If you're in a deadline, obviously you got to do what you got to do, but if you've got time to kind of think through what you're doing, you're going to come up with much better results and love your pages that much more, so that you don't look back 10 years from now and are disappointed with what you were putting out.
All your Tetris sound effects.
All right. I believe there's some more sound effects on that page, but I do want to get to some stuff here. This is from Marcus Toe, one of my favorite artists of the Robins, whether Nightwing, Damien, name your Robins, Mr. Hopkins.
Tim Drake.
That's Tim Drake. That's the one you love. Yeah. So he does some cool art. And he's one of my good friends, and was generous enough to give me one of these cool pages from something he has upcoming. And it's got a lot of energy. It's more traditional. That's why I asked for this artwork. So like I would see, this style in a standard comic book, and this is where, my brain goes on autopilot using, something like the fight to the finishes and all that stuff. But I wanted to see if we can come up with some different ones here, and just challenge ourselves, really. I think I flipped these pages. I wanted to start on this page and see what I can do with this cool kick he has here. Because what I'd usually do is give me a sound effect that can go here, because we don't have no script here. What do we got?
Can you zoom in so I can see it?
Yeah, I'm just doing the same. I'm squinting with Justin is trying to see what it is.
See.
Cool. I think a good thwack.
A thwack. All right, let's go with thwack. All right.
You better spell it the way I said it too.
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to do that. A thwack? Is that thwack, or is there a C?
Close enough.
All right. So
for a true experience, you should have waited until he was done with the sound effect and then tell him it was spelled wrong. So you had to redo it.
So I would probably use, a brushy font for this, right? I've used something like, because there's some cool brushwork back there, and I'd probably use something like, we have Ito, right? This is one of my go-to fonts where you know, I love the brush style. It's really energetic, and but I don't feel like it's really the best choice here, but it also is, again, one of those go-tos that I'm trying to avoid. So I already thought this through ahead of time so that I'm not wasting time on here. But there's a font called Buried Before. Is that what it is? Buried Before. And it has these cool, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, can I use this here? And I think it might just work out. So again, looking at the spacing, I would want this in the background. This is going to be one of those ones where I'm already planning ahead. Like once I get it down on the page, this is a big moment. This should be my biggest moment on the page if we look at the entire page. Quiet moment in the first panel, quiet moment second panel. These two are smaller panels with them screaming, and this is the money shot where I want to do my best work. And I'm thinking, okay, well, let's do a lot of masking on here. One, like I said, it's cool. Two, I don't want to cover up artwork. And three, I think we can blend in the text with that background with the cool texture back there. So we have our, I would break these up individually and sort of play with them in space. Actually, well, one I might do ahead of time is kind of skew these out, and then this is really big. So I'm like, okay, well, that's too much going on at once. So I might take some creative license in this case and then not spell it the way Justin told me spell it, right? But I'm going to take a couple extra A's. I don't like that K. And like I said, don't feel afraid to recreate parts of the sound effect. If it doesn't have exactly what you want, make it what you want. So I'm going to add that and add some K's over here. And this is one of those where I'd probably, you know, take some time, but because we're on a time constraint here, I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I would take some time to make a few extra K's, a few extra A's, just manipulating these each a little bit so that they are not all the same characters. And usually with the K, like I just do a flip or whatever, but in this case, you know what we're going to do, Justin? We're going to add a C. And we're working with perspective here, another thing we should keep in mind. So I want these to follow these lines as close as possible. Now this is a lot of thwack. I would probably ask for a different sound effect, but Justin said thwack.
I love how when everything is wrong, it's Justin's fault. When it's all right, he has nothing to do with it. He has no responsibility whatsoever.
I mean, that's the fun of Justin.
Where's the lie?
There we go. So again, black and white. So I'm just going to keep it black and white. It just works best for me. Your mileage may vary. And so I usually mask out the whole thing, and then I'll go in and tweak things. Or what I'll also do, and this is probably more because of me trying to be faster with things when I do this, I'll just mask that out and start to draw in the character, and then kind of manipulate each point later on. So that's one of the ways that I create masks. The other way is to carefully, painstakingly go in, and then I'll draw out my points with the sound effect held in on my clipboard, because I just cut it and now it's in the clipboard. And then after I make these careful points, I'll go in. You can see how careful I was with those points. I'll go in and then paste that in, or paste that behind it, and then do a Command 7 and mask it all out. But again, I don't want to, kind of waste everyone's time there. So what I'll end up doing is just really just going in and freestyling this right here. I don't know where that foot is. That foot's probably right on there, this head. Something went wrong there. It's not masked anymore, is it? No. Did they stop asking questions, Justin? Or you just stopped caring?
I think everyone did stop asking questions because they did not appreciate the treatment that the person reading the questions was getting.
It's less questions and more complaints now.
Got it. Mm-hmm. My bad. I didn't mean to make them feel angry about how we treat Justin, but
it's a normal response, the way that they have decided to stop talking.
I think too, it's worth noting, like, I think you can get away with having it that huge with how much you've masked it too. Like because I would imagine there's some people that when you first placed it down were like, what, that's a huge, like you said, that's a huge thwack for the kick. But then the moment it gets masked,
you're losing a lot of it.
It feels so much different. Yeah, it feels much more almost like this is ridiculous to say in a way, but less of a sound and more of a visual sort of like statement. I've been playing a lot of I'll bring in a video game example. Black Myth Wukong. I've been playing that, and whenever you beat a boss in it, when you hit like the final sort of hit that completely takes their HP to 0, it says defeated and it has the name of the boss, and then on the sides in like awesome Chinese script, I don't know what it says because I can't read Chinese, but text comes up as well, and it's like such a sort of like awesome visual kind of like anime influenced kind of, or manga influence I should say, sort of expression in that way. And that's kind of how this hits me. Once you've increased the size of it, it's more of a cool visual that ties it all together, as opposed to like just serving the purpose of being a sound within the art. Shut up, Justin.
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at a comment that came in that says justice for Justin.
I'm sorry, man.
Justice for Justin.
Yeah.
Justice for Justin. All right. Got support, Justin.
Yeah. We have another comment. Leave Justin alone.
That wouldn't happen to be Liz, would it? She's not in the chat.
No, if it was Liz, she would be helping you guys.
Yeah, okay. Be more mean to Justin.
Yeah.
So
his self-esteem is too high. Get it in there.
This is the sort of thing where, like I said, you want to try and test yourself out. This is, basically, I just went through this quickly, and again, if we had more time or whatever, or if I had more time.
Sorry, I didn't mean. Can you undim? Is the art dimmed?
Yes.
That'll help too. There we go.
And then, I think for this, it might. I think the black helps. And then when there's color added, because that black background might, have, a different or the white in the background might have a different color, and this would definitely stand out a little more. But now it just looks like you were saying, like some artistic part of it, like this visual art piece, where what if he was drawing the thwack in those lines that he already had down? That's the sort of thing that we're going for here, and looks pretty cool. Here we go.
Yeah, I dig it. we work on a book called Hardstyle Juice over at Comixology. It's pretty awesome. Pro wrestling sort of like tons of energy, crazy stylistic sort of approach to those stories. And the artist on that book does a lot of that as well, where he'll put in, those sort of like move names as sound effects within his speed lines and stuff like that. And yeah, it works really well.
Yeah.
We have a question that came in.
Far away.
Gartastic asked, "What is your opinions about barred eyes and sound effects? It's a thing for dialogue, but does it matter for sound effects?"
Repeat. Well,
Sure.
What barred eyes?
Yeah.
Barred eye crossbars. Got it.
Sorry, my accent probably threw you off with the way I pronounced it.
That Midwest thing. Are you Midwest? Are you considered Midwest?
Man, I went through a crisis when I realized I was Midwest.
Kind of.
Oh man. All right. Well, I'll let them argue about who's Midwest from who's not. But crossbar eyes, no, I don't use them in sound effects as well. It's crazy now, because when I even look at like billboards with standard text and I see a crossbar, I'm just like, no, I can't. It just stands out as something just egregious to me now, where I don't want to see it unless it's the pronoun. So no, I would never use it in a sound effect that way, unless it's like, there's somebody screaming and we're using the sound effect as a scream.
Wait. Then you would use a crossbar eye?
Like if they're saying, "I will not," if they're screaming.
Oh, got it. Okay.
If they're screaming the pronoun.
Sure. I think I've used crossbar eyes in sound effects before, but only in situations where it was like,
Ironic.
Jokingly someone saying CIA or, something like that, where it would otherwise follow the rule.
Yeah, like He-Man. Like He-Man, I have the power. I've done his whole thing in a sound effect style, and the crossbar eye plays there. But anywhere else I avoid it like the plague.
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ask too, because a lot of people know the rule when it's dialogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something that they think about until the situation pops up when they are doing a sound effect. And this is for I'm speaking like on behalf of the writers who are lettering their own books, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not something that they think about, because it's not something that they've read to what to do. So I think it's a good question to ask.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, to that point, we were talking about, the script. I think with the capital, like usually I see sound effects, and I do it myself, in capital letters. And then if you have like a sound effect with an I in it, whether it's shink or TikTok or whatever, with an I, and they capitalize the I, and now I have to go ahead and lowercase it in when I'm using a font that does have a crossbar I in it. So that's one of the things that I would consider when you're editing a script. It's not important, but that might help. That might be like one of the little gems that you can do for a letter, where you lowercase the I's even when they're in the sound effects. Okay. Let's see. I think aside from that, one of the things, let me go back to this page. One of the things that I think is important is what I've noticed is that sometimes, let's say this is I'm having a brain fart when it comes to like onomatopoeia. Whack. Let's use a whack here. And I'll use wall scroller. All right. So one of the things that I was mentioning before is I don't usually worry about the point of impact all the time. And I encourage other people to think this way through, because what I see often is that somebody might put a sound effect directly on a character, because it makes sense. Like I get it. Like this is where he's hitting, or they might put it out here or whatever. But we have a lot of cool space, and again, like I can work around him to get that, or that's stretching it, or even below here coming off the page, and then if there's I don't know what sort of balloon he might be saying something up here like ugh or something, whatever. So I'm giving space up top for something going on. I'm not covering up the character's face. So just be careful of that. If you wanted to have it at the point of impact, I'd probably put it below, because that works a lot better instead of having it up. And you never want to cover the characters. Again, you're doing a disservice to the artist who took time to draw that character's reaction. And you've got other opportunities to play with it as well. So that's one of the things I want to point out. This is why I picked this page in particular, kind of show where placement might come into play, where you're avoiding messing up the artwork itself. And then on the other hand, if I have something like this, and you want to stay at the point of impact, let's use a brush circle here. I don't think brush circle really works, but I'm just going to use it. Let me zoom in here. It's one of the things that I didn't realize. I should have been zooming in all this time so you guys can see easily. I'm just used to, staying. One of the reasons why I stay zoomed out when I'm lettering is because I want to see the entire page. Things work together as a whole. Obviously, we're panel to panel, but when you start to see it as a whole, you can start to kind of think in terms of, like I was looking here, what's the impact panel, and how are these working together on the page. So one of the things why I don't zoom in as far is because of that. But
I do sort of like a a 3 set, like a 3 zoom set. So if I'm working on like masking and stuff like that, or like closer details, I'll have it zoomed pretty much in, not all the way, but pretty close. I'll always come out during the entire process to the panel to make sure that like the arc of movement and everything, I'm not going too off there. And then I'll always do a full like Command 0 full page. And that was something I picked up from you as well, with just looking at the entire page as its own sort of flow and symmetry and everything else, and not even reading order stuff, but just the way that it feels and sort of looks visually.
So here's one of those times where if you're coming from point of impact, or you want to play with the art, something like this might work, where you're kind of going in dimension with it. And I probably tinker with this to death, where I'm making sure that I'm really in correct perspective. I might even like overlap them so that one comes in front of the other. And I know there are like lots of letterers who already do this as they're going. Like I've always been, front. Wait, I can't even describe it because it's just the way I letter. Like I usually have the first letter behind. I don't know why. I just usually have it this way. But in this case, obviously, it doesn't work dimensionally to have it like that. And I know some letters who work in reverse. And so this might be. one of the other things that I might do here, and this is with masking, if I had the color, I might blend the bottoms of this into this effect here so that it like becomes part of it. All right. If I was really ambitious, I might even just go into the artwork in Photoshop and draw it out and extend it. And that's, again, you have to have time. You have to have, permission from the artist, all that stuff. So it just really depends on the overall relationship you have with the creative team and what sort of time frame you have that you can kind of make these cool artistic decisions. If you're working in Photoshop and you are handy with a brush, you can always bring those brush styles in here. And again, you can even work with brushes straight in this in Illustrator. Like when what was that book we were on? Beyond Behemoth, is that what it was called? Hopkins?
Yes, I'm trying to think. There's like three different. There's an Ahoy book,
exactly,
which I don't think you're talking about. There's like three different projects I'm mixing up.
And so, like, you can use some of these brushes you can get from Blambot. You can make your own and come up with your own sound effects by drawing them out. And again, if you're handy with a brush in Photoshop, you can do the same thing in Photoshop. But in Beyond Behemoth, I made a lot of those sound effects with stuff like this font here. And what you would do is just, draw them out. I usually hit expand appearance, and then I'll go ahead and just Pathfinder those into one shape. And now it's all one shape, and I have a sound effect that I can use and reuse as needed. And that's why in Beyond Behemoth, you might see a lot of these little ink stains if I've missed them. Because what I was doing is just manipulating the font on the fly. And then I would end up having, when I move it around, some of these would be gone. And that texture sort of played well in some of them. But yeah, I would recommend learning how to use these brushes if you want to get, go beyond your fonts and just make your own stuff. If you're good at drawing, if you're good with calligraphy or your penmanship, go for it.
Question from Bernardo.
Yes, sir.
What's your take on subbing sound effects that's very common in manga localization? Do you dig that approach, or would you rather make redrawing all sound effects in manga the default style?
Oh, I love subs because
Me too.
because otherwise you're retouching. All right, so when I first came in the game, I was a full-time manga letterer. That's how I got into lettering. And retouch is hard. Basically, you're responsible for erasing the entire sound effect. There's no layering. It's the sound effect is there, and you take that out and you have to redraw whatever background is there. If it's over a character, you're redrawing the character. If there's tones, you're recreating the tone inside of it, and it's just hell. It could take hours on a page. Yeah, I used to get paid I think when I first started it was $500 a book. $500 a book, and a book would take me weeks to do. So just think about that. If I'm on a single page retouching for hours, it was just hell. And so not only are you responsible for creating a new sound effect that looks like the old sound effect, that's not the major problem. The major problem was the retouch part. And so once I didn't have to retouch, or some books you'll still have to retouch, and some companies are a little more flexible, and they'll have you retouch just the hard sound effects. Now there are books that have easier retouch, and I love those. There are books with harder retouch. The last one that we were responsible for, where I retouched all the sound effects, had to redraw them by hand, was Ping Pong. A great book. Turned out great. I loved the work that we did in it, the sound effects I created in there. But it's hard and time consuming. And if I can sub them, I do prefer that. Any other questions? Any other thoughts from you guys?
I was going, just as a fun anecdote, one of my best friends lives in Germany, and he just picked up the German edition of Ping Pong and sent me the cover and a picture. We're just like, oh, I've been wanting to read this forever. And I was like, oh, yeah, Darren lettered that and did some awesome stuff with the sound effects. And he sent me a little picture that they had a German letterer for the translation, but they kept your sound effects and credited you in the German edition.
Oh,
which
that's
I'd never
pretty cool.
seen done before. Yeah.
You didn't tell me that ever, and
I think I just
really
found out
mean of you.
yesterday, so I'm sorry.
I think you're lying. I think you've held on to this secret for so long.
The secret that you're big in Germany.
Yeah,
I'll take it. I'll take it. Go to Germany. That's pretty cool.
it had a cool. Let me look up the picture actually right now, since we're at the end of the. Are we at the end? I don't.
Yeah, we're at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it was called something else. Sound words. I mean, it was in German, so maybe that's just how you say sound effects in German. But sound words, Darren Bennett.
Sound words. All right, I'll take it.
That's actually kind of cool.
I'm the sound words guy.
I like that.
Yeah. Start calling them sound words.
Changing all of my business cards now.
This is going to be an historical document. We're going to be able to trace back when everyone started calling sound effects sound words. It was this sound effects demo.
We'll have to change the title of this demo. The sound words demo. And we're getting ready to wrap up. I hope you guys learned a few things, enjoyed our talk, discussion, whatever have you, and banter. And hopefully, we'll do more of these if you guys are so interested. Like I said, I'm trying to do a bunch of things through the studio, classes that can teach you, the ins and outs of lettering. We'll get, instead of just talking about, just concepts, we get into the technical side of things, showing you how to use Illustrator and how to use all these tools that I've been using tonight. And we might have, special guests maybe throughout the lettering community to help us out. And yeah, like I said, hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight, got a little bit out of it. Happy Letterer Appreciation Day to all of you letterers out there, and to all of you guys just coming into the game. Welcome aboard. It's it's a fun job. We get to put sound effects into comics. How cool is that? I grew up, in the Batman era, whereas then you see the bam. That was pretty cool to me, and that I do that for a living now. Awesome.
Yeah. It's also the fastest way to get someone to understand what you do as a letterer if they don't know what lettering is.
Right.
The moment you start to explain so you write the comic, no, so you draw, no, sound effects, that always clicks for people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Justin, how do you end these things?
So what you don't want to do is just close the browser. That would be terrible. There should be a button at the top, I think, that just says end.
End the stream. All right, guys.
There you go.
Again, thank you guys for coming along. We'll see you next time. Take care.